And we are back to discuss some more Marvel shows. This time, Loki. It just premiered today, a couple hours ago. Preston, it's been a minute since we actually sat down and recorded. How are you?
I'm, kicking it old school, keeping it real.
I'm sorry. Don't stop recording. Keep going. That was gold. So Loki. Great feel. I love the TVA. I love that retro feeling. I have to ask, and I don't mean to
Mm,
be a douche when I say this.
yeah.
Maybe I should be asking someone, and once again I apologize. Maybe I should be asking someone who's like much older, but does it always feel weird seeing like because clearly the aesthetic for the TVA guys, that's like, old timey TV looking technology
Yeah.
shit.
Analog kind of stuff. Yeah.
Right, analog kind of stuff. I've always wondered, does that look weird for people who were alive when that was like the new thing, and looking back on it now, it's just a parody? Like, I
Well,
wonder if.
I'm not quite that old,
Yeah, I know.
but but nostalgia in general is kind of interesting because what people remember about an era is not exactly what the era was like. Additionally, the thing that never fits is, when somebody does an 80s period piece or something like, and everybody's like in their sport coats with rolled up, sleeves or whatever that the average Joe never did, like, they also like forget that all of the objects from the previous periods are still like integrated into that period. So like if it's the 80s, they'll be like, "Oh, there's like a DeLorean and everybody's like talking about Reagan and they've all got spiky hair," and you forget that like actually I grew up in the 80s and like you know what the car you saw on the road the most was the VW Beetle. This car from the 70s because they were
Hmm.
still running. The Beetle like wouldn't break down, and so they were everywhere. And like every eighth car was a Beetle, and it was this relic of the 70s, but it was very 80s because it was still there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the weird thing about now. This is a little with Loki. It's a little specific because they're creating this kind of retro futurist like aesthetic that never existed, but has this. It does have this 70s feel of going to like an old the mall that people don't go to anymore that kind of is run down and has that like old 70s feel to it, that there's definitely some of that,
So you don't
like
remember any TVs like this still being around?
none that had like the kind of warped look to it. There was definitely still dial TVs. I mean, we had a black and white dial TV, like people's old TVs, just as you get a new TV and you keep the old TV, like
Mm-hmm.
people's old TVs, were the old ones. But, I'd never remember anything as bulbous as some of the stuff you see in retro, um, uh, shows and stuff. There's always something that's a little off about it. It's not that I didn't watch like Stranger Things, but Stranger Things is completely off on so many things. Like they all went to a mall in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, and you're like, that malls in nowhere, Indiana didn't exist. Like certain things don't go together. So,
You're gonna have a lot of
the
people from Indiana, like, getting on your case there.
No, I'm in middle of nowhere. I mean, people from Indiana will back me up. Unless you're in like some sort of suburb of Indianapolis, like there was not going to be like a huge luxurious mall like in Stranger Things season 3 that did not exist in the state of Indiana in the 1980s. Like, no, sorry,
Preston,
you
you're
know.
ruining the dream. Stop it.
Yeah, I mean, because I don't know, like I know it's like no, it's the middle of nowhere, Indiana. Like even today, like how many places in the middle of nowhere, Indiana have a huge mall? Um, I mean, maybe a strip mall, but something like
Are
that. I
you?
don't
Do you
know.
dare deny the greatness that is Gary, Indiana? Do you dare deny that?
Well, Gary, Indiana.
I know. I have a buddy of mine who works in Gary as a paramedic. I know. But
Gary's pretty
I
rough.
just love the aesthetic. It's
It's a beautiful aesthetic.
oh,
It's
very
it's
beautiful.
wonderful. It's a wonderful look. The retrofuturism, the fact that everything is kind of dirty,
Is that the
and
word
run
for it?
down.
Retrofuturism?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. This idea of things looking futuristic, but also looking like they're from the past. Have you ever seen the movie Brazil?
As a Brazilian, I have not seen the movie Brazil.
It has little to do with Brazil, but like
Bet.
it had a retro futurist vibe as well. So for instance, all of their computers had black and white monitors, and they had typewriter keyboards, and you know they would type, and then when they would print, they would have like the clackety clack of like typewriters, but like a regular page would like print out. You know, it was like very very neat style they had in that movie.
I feel as though like that's what kind of our future will be, is the ability
Yeah,
to kind of encase your life in how it used to be back in the old day, but without all the
yeah.
troubles and tribulations of the old day, you know?
What?
Like, I'm sure in 100 years from now, if someone wanted to relive what it was like in like the 1940s, they could without, you know, all the
Yeah.
disease and poverty that came with the 1940s.
What's funny is the thing about retro and retrofuturism is that, or anything like that, is that you have to remember that at the time when people created these styles, they thought that these styles were the future, and now we think of them as the past. Like the classic example is like the 1950s diner. These silver pods with rounded curves, right? At the time they were just like, oh, this is so futuristic looking. Like in the future, everything will be curved and like silver and shiny. And
That's
you're
kind
like,
of true.
oh yeah, like this idea. Oh, okay. But now we look at it and we go, well, that's the past, because that's a past idea of what the future is. Kind of like a hover car, like or whatever. Like you think that's going to be the future, but it's not. It's not at all. A flying car.
And I have to ask you this because everybody's been saying it. Does this show feel a bit more cinematic than WandaVision and Falcon and Soldier?
I think that, I believe it does. I think it does. But I think that the real thing is just that Tom
Hiddleston?
Hiddleston, he's so fucking good. Like,
He
he's
is.
so good. Like, his acting ability, not to say anything about all the other actors that were part of WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier. They're all great. They're all professionals. And Paul Bettany is specifically a really great actor, but he's playing a robot, so it's a little different. But like to have like Tom Hiddleston is like, he just carries the whole thing. It doesn't matter. Like, it was beautiful. It was, the whole thing was put together, had a great plot, great ideas. But the fact that like they could have given them anything and Tom Hiddleston could have spun it to gold.
I was
It's
wondering
just
the entire
incredible.
time if they even had a script and they just threw Tom Hiddleston as the character of Loki and just, did things around him and he had to react as
Yeah.
Loki. I was wondering the entire time because he is a natural at this role.
Oh my God. It was, yeah, it's, I could watch him forever. And for this reason, I think Loki, I loved WandaVision, but Loki right now, like Loki is much better, much better.
For a show where it's a guy essentially standing in like one location and just
Yeah.
most of it is just talking. I didn't find it as boring as I thought it was gonna be.
Right.
I liked it.
Even take the scene where he watches his life and they're like, okay, we have 2012 Loki and we essentially need to get to End of Ragnarok Loki. But the problem is that like in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that progression took a whole bunch of movies to get to, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, Tom Hiddleston, here's 2 minutes. Like, sell the fact that you have now like gone forward this many movies and have like changed as an individual. And he fucking does it. He fucking, like, just with his facial reactions and everything, like, you buy it, It's insane. It's insane.
So I recently, and this is only because I'm subscribed to Red Letter Media. Red Letter Media recently came out with a video, a re-review of Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992 by Francis Ford Coppola. I never seen this film. I've never seen it. I recently downloaded it and I was watching a little bit of it. Fucking Keanu Reeves, that has to be the most miscast. They were talking about it in the video. I'm like, Keanu Reeves can't be that bad. He is generally that bad. Holy shit. Going from how great Tom Hiddleston is as Loki to Keanu Reeves and Bram Stoker's Dracula? Fuck.
I believe someone said to me once, Keanu Reeves is a fantastic movie star he is a horrible film actor. You know, like, right? I mean, he's not, I mean, I think he does Ted really well as a character, but nah, I mean, Keanu, like, come on. Everybody knows Keanu Reeves is, I mean, at this point, we're 30 years past the punchline of Keanu Reeves being a bad actor. Wonderful human being. Great action star. But bad actor. Tom Hiddleston, I mean...
It's just night and day. Like, I was watching just a little bit of that film, and it's just so miscasted, and he's so bland. And then I went and watched Loki, and just, it's night and day, like, what a great actor is versus, you know, that poor Keanu Reeves. Such a nice guy, but it's just, he was very miscasted there.
I mean, it's like how when we watched WandaVision and how we were both enamored with Catherine Hahn. Like, and how like, her level of ability is just so above everybody else that it's just, she encapsulates you, you know. It's I don't know. So whatever. Once again, Marvel is spun gold. It's really fucking good.
Why do you say it like it's just, oh god?
I mean, it's like you keep thinking that Marvel's gonna fail. Like, when are they gotta jump the shark? And you're like, no, this is another good one. This is the worst you could
like it.
Yeah, I know. It's like the worst you can say about a Marvel movie is that, like, it was pretty good and forgettable. You know, like, it's a Thor 2. You know, like, that's the worst you could do.
Or the Iron Man 3, and isn't that great?
When Thor 2 and Iron Man 3 are your worst movies, like, you're doing pretty well.
So the episode wasn't an A+, it wasn't a 10 out of 10. There were a couple of things that confused the fuck out of me that made no sense, and these aren't like I wouldn't take these off the score, but I have to bring these up. Like, okay, so when he does most of the episode is just exposition. It's exposition galore, and that's fine. But how the fuck? I'm so confused. Maybe you can explain this.
Okay.
How since you're more of a comics guy, how do two timelines war with each other?
So, and this is a slight deviation from the comic book to the cinematic universe. So in the comic book, it's a multiverse. So you have different people hopping from parallel dimensions and having wars with each other. And so the big character in the Marvel comic book universe that jumps parallel dimensions is Kang the Conqueror. So there's just infinite copies of Kang the Conqueror, and he keeps hopping into the 616 universe to fight the Fantastic Four. And they keep defeating him. It doesn't matter if they kill him. It doesn't matter, because there's just an infinite number of Kang the Conquerors out there. And so he becomes this, like, running joke for a while, and then they made him serious. But Kang the Conqueror is just, you know, a guy who, like, wants to conquer everything, and he exists in infinite universes, and so he keeps popping up. And so the Time Authority, who is not a huge thing in the Marvel universe, and I'll kind of explain, like, what they represent and the level and where they've gone with it. So the Time Authority only appears in a few comic books over the course of several decades. There's like a Thor adventure, there's a Fantastic Four adventure, and then probably the biggest one is a She-Hulk adventure that gives the most backstory on them. And so in the Marvel universe, they don't have God and Jesus and all of that. They have their own cosmic deities. There's eternity and death, chaos and order, all these different entities, right? They're the ones that really govern the Marvel universe. And then, but then there's this meta element to the Marvel universe that goes above the cosmic entities. So when we start thinking about cosmic entities, this is where Infinity Gauntlet, like in the original Infinity Gauntlet comic book, Thanos beats up all the cosmic entities and imprisons them, and is essentially lord over everything because he has infinite power, And so it's like, how do you go above infinite power? And so She-Hulk and Deadpool and a handful of other characters, Howard the Duck, they know their comic book characters. They can see the edge of the panel they can walk out of the panel occasionally. Like they know that the world is a comic book. And so this is the weird thing. So when you get to the Time Authority, it's a tongue-in-cheek reference to the writers of the comic book.
That's what I was thinking. This seemed
Yeah.
like all it seems like is like the writers trying to put right, some of the stuff the other writers fucked up on or went a little too far
That's
with.
right. And so what's hilarious is the weapon that the Time Authority uses to kill people is called a retro cannon, where they can retcon people, wiping them out of existence, changing their existence. And it's I mean, just like writers, right? A writer can retcon you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they go out and they try to clean things up. And it's the same thing about like all of these different writers writing crazy stories and then another person coming in later and being like, oh, I've got to make sense of that story. And so they retcon it and they try to make the plot fit, And that's the metaphor for like who these people are. Like they're outside of, they are the writers, and so Loki saying like, oh, do I have to be the villain? Like, do I have to die? And my only purpose of existing is to make other people better. This isn't my, it's Thor's story because
That
Loki
was very
only exists,
sobering.
right? But this is the big question: is like, can he break out of his own story in this retro sense? Like, what could be above the Infinity Gauntlet? This is the whole scene of like finding those Infinity Stones in the desk drawer and them meaning nothing. It's like, well, what's above that? Well, what's above that is the actual like writers. And so when She-Hulk, for instance, like gets involved and goes on trial for deviations in the timeline, they actually give her a tour, and there's a point in which they start talking about different universes that have been destroyed, and they have an area where they like rid themselves of the universes, and the ink and drawing just fades out to a white blank page when they show her those universes being like annihilated.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah. So this is yeah. So it's fun. It's it's fun in that sense. So we're definitely in this like weird meta narrative, but I think in the comic is the idea that they're managing multiple hundreds of thousands of multiverse universes, parallel dimensions, while in the cinematic universe there appears to only be one. So which is a big thing.
Sacred timeline or something.
Yeah, the supreme sacred timeline. Now maybe in the past there were many more, and in the future there'll be many more because we have our Doctor Strange
Multiverse of Madness, movie.
Right, and the Spider-Man movie, which we know is going to be multiverse because it's going to have the other Spider-Man versions.
Well, they kind of like put themselves in a weird position because at one point in like his exposition, he goes, "Long ago, this all happened." So like, so is that it's long ago, but you guys are the time police and you guys exist outside like the huh? What do you mean long ago? Long ago in your time or whose time?
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, the time police exist in paradox. Like the creators were actually created at the end of the universe, and so then they go back in time to create the Time Authority, and so they want to keep the timeline the same so that they can exist in the first place and preserve their own existence. So like when Loki is making all of those comments about who gets to decide and why, like why is this particular timeline so sacred and wonderful? Well, the answer is because it's the timeline in which the creators, the three lizard people, like exist, like and are made. Like that's why it's sacred, because they need to get to that destination or else they'll cease to exist. In many ways, it's kind of like Back to the Future, right? Like why is, why is Michael J. Fox like meddling with things? Well, it's because if he doesn't, he's going to cease to exist. Well, so he has to make things right again. He has to get his parents together.
So 2 points of the show that I really liked. The first one was the sobering moment where Owen Wilson's character essentially, I thought it was Morbius for a minute there, but no, but it's Mobius. He tells Loki that You're just a side character to make other people realize their potential.
Mhm.
Ooh, and then you start to
Yeah.
then like in my head, I start to go, "Am I a side character in someone's story?" I am. I know I am. I'm a side character in your story. You're the main character of your story. I'm the main character of my story, and your side. Like, and then you start to realize, yeah, that starts to sting a little bit in every regard.
So Kevin Smith, who hasn't done anything of worth in decades, and is
It's not true. He's coming out with Clerks 3. You're not excited for Clerks 3?
no, no. There is a single line from his last movie, Jay and Silent Bob reboot, that is good, and it's a really good line, but the rest of the movie is absolute garbage.
Of
So,
course.
but so at the end of the movie, you know, I'm spoiling this movie that you don't want to see,
I
but
saw the first
I'm
Jay and Silent Bob. I
yeah.
loved it, but I was a child,
Yeah.
so
Well, this one is purposely the exact same story. They get to the end of the movie and they run into Ben Affleck's character from Chasing Amy,
hmm.
and he has a kid now,
Hmm.
and he says, you know, you go through life thinking that you're Bruce Wayne, and then you realize you're not Bruce Wayne, you're Thomas Wayne, or maybe Bruce Wayne's mom. I forgot her name. So well, that was the whole joke, right? Because of that was the whole joke because of Batman v Superman, right? But that's his line, right? Um, he ruins it by looking at the camera, and you're like, oh god, like like you ruined a really great scene, but it's a really great line. Like, yeah, you go through life thinking you're Batman, and in the end, you're actually Thomas Wayne. You know, like your job is to you know raise the important character. You know, your job is to be the supporting character. You know, so um, that's the more like positive side to it. But Loki doesn't have kids, so
The other part is that I really liked is that turns out well, first off, other little things I also like. He was DB Cooper based off a
yeah, but
running joke.
it had nothing to do with the plot.
It was just randomly thrown in there. I didn't mind it.
Yeah.
It was stupid. It was just randomly. It
I
was a
mean,
bet
if they
between him
start
and Thor. It was dumb, but
right. I mean, that was very Family Guy,
yeah,
right?
yeah, a little bit.
I mean, if they do more of those Family Guy things and it becomes a running gag, I'll accept
The
it. But
cutaways.
if that's the only cutaway, I'm gonna be like, what the fuck was that? Like, what the fuck was that?
But no, the other thing I liked is that apparently the villain of the main story is Loki himself. So I wonder if this is going to be very confusing because whenever you involve time
Right.
travel in anything, it gets convoluted, it gets dumb. Um, but
Is he fighting a different variant, or is he fighting the same variant at a different time?
or maybe this all takes place like at the end, and the villain of the story is him, but like he goes back in time and he's stuck in his own little paradoxical loop where he's constantly trying to oppose the time police, and he's going, but like like. Or the other theory is that Mephisto's behind all of it because I think that was like the running
Yeah,
joke with
yeah.
WandaVision, and the little kid points to Mephisto.
Right, right.
So the devil, which is supposed to be Mephisto, but that's the major theory everybody has is that the entire course of the show is going to be Loki trying to like stop himself, but in reality he becomes the villain anyways, and it's just it's like a little loop.
Yeah, yeah. But we'll see. I mean, I think in the end, he's going to be successful in destroying the Time Variant Authority. You
Can you
know,
destroy the Time Variant Authority, and is that possible?
well, it didn't exist before, right? And there was
Yeah.
war. Like it exists. It came into being after the multiverse war, and we know that there's going to be a multiverse again because of the Doctor Strange title. So like, we kind of know that the Time Variant Authority is going to be like out, right? Like we kind of already know that he's been stealing those canisters, those timeline destroying canisters. He just brings them, if he brings them all to the authority and destroys the authority, maybe a multiverse will create, and then all of a sudden you've got a battle.
Hmm. That's interesting because I was just thinking that because if Spider-Man and Doctor Strange are going to break the whole multiverse thing, where's the Time Authority for that? But I feel as though like they shouldn't care about the multiverse more so as the timelines. As long as
Yeah.
Doctor Strange isn't going back in time, or Spider-Man isn't going back in time in another
Yeah.
multiverse, it shouldn't matter.
It's very Crisis on Infinite Earth too. Like the idea that there used to be multiple timelines and then they collapsed and now there's only one. Um, I don't know if you're familiar with DC Comics at all, but
Didn't they do that to usher in the New 52?
yeah, they did, and then I guess I don't know. Some people like the New 52 and some people didn't, but the they keep having to reset it. But in the DC universe, there tends to only be one universe, except for I guess they're Elseworlds. But I don't know. In Marvel, there's universe hopping all the time, so I don't know. It's a lot of it to the point where it's like, how much can I really care about 616 anymore when I know there's infinite others?
I mean,
Yeah.
I would assume that Marvel would use the other universes as a clutch because if you think about it, perfect example with Spider-Man. What's the point in watching the Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield Spider-Mans if they don't really count? You know, it's like when Disney retcon 95% of every Star Wars thing ever. What's the point in owning all these comics I bought? Like, it feels like garbage now. It feels like, what was the point if it doesn't really count? You know?
But that is the nature of like all fiction, right? Like that there's always many versions of the same thing.
For
Like
comic
there's a
books, yeah, I'm not a big comic book guy, but like
but
for
there's a bazillion, there's a bazillion Sherlock Holmes. Like, I mean, I
that's
suppose there's
different.
the original real, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle
I would
Sherlock
argue there
Holmes,
are
but
different iterations of it, sure, but at the end of the day, I always want to come back to one main canon timeline that won't be retcon. You know?
yeah. I mean, even the term canon is such an ironic term. Like we use canon because so so the word canon it comes from Catholicism. Like that people were going around creating different versions of Christianity, different stories about Jesus, different ideologies. And so the Catholic Church had to declare like, no, we're the church and this is the truth and this is canon law. Like, and so that's what canon means.
I
Like
did not know
the
that.
official, yeah, the official Catholic like doctrine. Um, and then, the Pope is actually like declaring it. Now, not that like canon law isn't completely riddled with contradictions and changes and all of this different stuff.
Of
But
course.
this is the whole thing is that like, oh, we try to create an actual thing that happened that's canon. That's the real story, but you can never really create like an official real story. There's always like some sort of contradiction or variance, right? That just doesn't make any sense.
Hmm.
So what do you do? I don't know. But it's funny, it's funny because people get all bent out of shape. Like what really happened? Is it canon? Is Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer canon? Or is it just like, Dasher and Dancer, Prancer and Blitzen, are they the real, but is Rudolph really part of is he canon? Like what, like who fucking knows?
What did you think of Loki? I really liked it. I thought it
Oh
was
yeah.
great. I would give it like a. I want to give it a 10 out of 10. It's so good. I really
Yeah,
liked the first
yeah. No,
episode.
I'll give it a 9 out of 10,
Yeah, I
I
like
think you
that.
said you said earlier that you didn't want to give it a 10 out of 10. So I
Because
don't want you to contradict yourself. What's your canon number that you're going to give?
there were parts where I'm like, but it was so good. I like all the characters. I love Tom Hiddleston. He really makes the show, of course. Owen Wilson, I haven't seen him in anything. I'm glad after his I think he had a suicide attempt a couple years ago. I'm glad he's
Oh.
back doing stuff. He looks
And
okay.
he was better. He's better than because normally he's just Owen Wilson. So
Right.
he was a little. I'm not saying he was like much more than Owen Wilson, but he was a little more than Owen Wilson. I liked him.
His
Yeah,
banter with him and Tom Hiddleston was great. I loved it. I don't know.
yeah.
You know what? I'll give it a perfect 10 out of 10 for this episode. I really liked it. I thought it was great. I really liked it. I'll tell you
Because,
this.
by the way, for a Brazilian, you're such a bad Catholic. I can't believe like
Wait, what? How?
You didn't know about canon law?
No, oh yeah, you're right. I'm very. I'm non-practicing. Sorry to the other Brazilians. Um, no, I
Oh,
really
so
liked
that.
it. I will say this is my test for why I like it. I would be willing to watch this episode again and again and again. The other episodes any episode for WandaVision and Falcon and Soldier, not really. I've seen them once. I don't need to watch them again. This show has some replayability for me. I really like it so far.
Yeah, so far we'll see. I mean, I kind of felt that WandaVision had more rewatchability because I rewatched WandaVision halfway through, and it had a lot of rewatchability. But now that I've seen the last episode, I'm like, nah. Like, like I was looking for a lot of things that didn't lead to anywhere, and I was like, oh, they put all this like detail into it, and then I was like, nah, it didn't lead anywhere. I was imagining half of it. So well, this though it's different. It's all about the performances. So